When the golden chair rises, burdens break, and the church rejoices, shouting, singing, crying. Watch the miracle that moves hearts forever. In a small town tucked under the southern sky where the streets whispered secrets and the air hung heavy with heat and hope, there stood a church at the corner of Lawson and Pine. Folks called it Zion's Grace, though the old wooden sign out front had long since lost its lettering to time and weather. The church looked like it had been stitched together by faith itself, paint peeling, windows cloudy, steeple leaning just a bit, but inside, it pulsed with a strange, undeniable energy. Something holy. Something old. Behind the pulpit, hanging high and still, was a golden chair, suspended by nothing visible, floating in midair like the breath of God had simply refused to let it fall. That chair never moved. Not for storms, not for praise, not even when folks cried out for it. But every now and then, the chair would shift. Slowly. Mysteriously. It would sway. It would shine. And when it did, the people knew, someone's prayers had been answered. Folks came from all over, dragging hope behind them like suitcases packed too full. Mothers came with tears. Men came with fists still sore from fighting their demons. Old folks came with regrets knotted in their chests. But the chair, oh, that chair, moved for none of them unless it chose to. On the edge of town, past the liquor store with the flickering sign and the barbershop that played jazz too loud, lived a woman named Marceline Dupree. She was the kind of woman people talked about but never to. Skin the color of deep honey, eyes that looked like they had seen too many sunrises and not enough peace. She wore her heels like armor, her lipstick like a promise, and her silence like a shield. Marceline worked nights. Folks called her all sorts of names, but never the name her mama gave her. They thought they knew her story, pieced it together from gossip and glances. But they didn't know what she prayed for when no one was listening. They didn't know that sometimes she stood outside Zion's Grace long after the last hymn had been sung, just watching. Listening. Hoping that maybe, just maybe, that golden chair would move for someone like her. One morning, just before the sun cracked open the sky, Marceline did something she hadn't done since she was a little girl in pigtails and patent shoes. She walked through the doors of that crooked church. Her heels clicked against the wood floor, echoing louder than her heartbeat. The congregation froze. Pastor Reuben Johnson looked up from his Bible like he'd seen a ghost, and maybe he had. Whispers crawled along the pews. "Is that Lord, what she doin' here? Church ain't no place for." But Marceline didn't flinch. She walked straight down that center aisle like she belonged to every inch of it. Sat down in the front pew with her chin held high and her soul hanging low. Pastor Reuben paused just a moment, then cleared his throat. He'd been preaching since his hair was black and his back was straight, and he knew when the Spirit was working. So he didn't change the sermon. Didn't preach fire or brimstone. Just opened his heart and let the word pour out like sweet tea on a hot afternoon. As the music rose and the choir swayed, something strange began to happen. It started as a shimmer. A soft glow curling around the edges of that golden chair. Folks turned their heads. Eyes widened. The glow grew brighter, richer, as if the sun itself had stepped into the sanctuary. And then, slow and sure, the chair began to sway. It didn't rock like it was pushed. It moved like it had been waiting. Waiting on something real. Something true. Gasps filled the room. "It's moving. Lord have mercy. Who's it for?" Marceline didn't move. Didn't blink. She just stared up at the light, at the chair now glowing so bright it painted gold across the walls. And in that moment, the silence inside her broke like a dam. Tears spilled down her cheeks, quiet and heavy. The chair hung higher than before, bathed in brilliance, until the whole church felt wrapped in warmth. Wrapped in grace. And then, as if satisfied, the chair stilled. The glow dimmed. The air set. But something had shifted. The story don't end here though. No, you see, that was just the morning the chair moved. What came after, that's where the real miracle lived. That afternoon, after the pews had emptied and the organ had gone quiet, Marceline stayed seated. The sunlight filtered through the stained glass in streaks of violet and rose, falling soft across her shoulders like a blessing. Pastor Reuben came down from the pulpit slow, careful not to startle the moment, like he knew he was walking on sacred ground. He sat beside her, folding his old hands in his lap. He didn't speak right away. Just let the silence hum between them like an old hymn. Finally, he said, "You saw it, didn't you?" Marceline nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't think it would move. Not for me." He chuckled, low and warm. "That chair don't move for who we think deserves it. It moves for truth. For surrender. You brought something in here this morning that heaven had been waiting on." She looked at him then, her eyes rimmed red but steady. "I don't know what comes next. I ain't got nobody. Ain't got nothing but nights I can't remember and mornings I try to forget." Pastor Reuben leaned back, looking up at the now still chair. "You got a second chance. That's what that chair says. Don't promise easy. Don't promise perfect. But it promises new." Marceline left the church with the kind of peace that wraps itself around your ribs and makes it easier to breathe. She walked past the same corner where men used to call her name like it was a dare. Past the bar where her heels had clicked like warnings. This time, they clicked like footsteps toward freedom. It didn't happen overnight. The world didn't suddenly soften its edges. The whispers didn't stop. The judgment still rolled in like thunder on humid evenings. But something inside Marceline had changed, some deep shift in her spirit that refused to go back to who she used to be. She found work at Miss Hattie's Soul Kitchen, bussin' tables first, then helping in the back when old man Jerome got too tired to stir the pots. She saved what little she made, enough to rent a room that didn't smell like regret. She started wearing her natural curls out, letting them frame her face like a crown she forgot she owned. People started seeing her differently, some with curiosity, others with cautious respect. The kids on the block called her Miss Celine and came running to her porch when they scraped their knees or wanted to hear a story. She told them tales that weren't in books, tales with angels that wore work boots and miracles that lived in places like Zion's Grace. And every Sunday, without fail, she sat in the same front pew. Quiet. Grateful. Watching. Sometimes the chair didn't move for weeks. Sometimes it did. But whenever it swayed, whenever it glowed and hung a little higher, folks would glance at Marceline. Not because they thought she made it happen, but because she reminded them that it could happen. That maybe grace came in high heels, that maybe salvation wore red lipstick and had a past. One Sunday, a young woman walked in, eyes hard, lips tight, wearing pain like armor. Marceline saw her right away. She stood up slow, met her halfway down the aisle, and without a word, took her hand. Led her to the front. And up above, as if the heavens themselves had been holding their breath, that golden chair began to shimmer once again. The story ain't over. Not yet. Because as long as the chair still hangs, there's still hope. And as long as broken people walk through the doors of Zion's Grace, the Spirit keeps moving. The summer days stretched on slow and golden, thick with heat and the scent of jasmine curling through the streets. At Zion's Grace, the congregation grew, not just in number, but in something deeper. In understanding. In compassion. People came not just to witness the miracle of the hanging chair, but to carry the quiet hope it offered back out into the world. And Marceline. She became a sort of anchor in that small church, not by standing behind the pulpit, but by sitting right in the front pew, week after week, with her heart wide open. She prayed with people who didn't know how to pray. She listened without judging. She showed up even when the old parts of her still whispered lies. One Wednesday night, while the choir rehearsed and the sky outside hung low with thunder, Pastor Reuben called Marceline into his office. The room was small and cluttered with books that had edges turned soft from years of hands and hope. He leaned against his desk, eyes kind, but serious. "I've been thinking, Celine. The way you move through this place, the way you help folks find their way." She cut him off, nervous. "Pastor, I ain't trying to lead nothing. I'm still working on myself." He nodded slowly. "Ain't we all?" He reached into his drawer and pulled out a small brass key. Placed it gently in her palm. "That's for the side door. Church ain't just Sundays, and we need people here during the in-between. Folks been a skin for you when you're not around. They don't just want you to pray with them. They want you to walk with them." She stared at the key. It was heavy for something so small. Not just metal, but meaning. "You trust me with this?" I trust what God's doing in you. That chair moved for a reason, Marceline. We just watch it hang, but he knew your name before we even saw you walk through that door. She held that key close to her chest, like it might slip away if she breathed too hard. That night, lightning cracked the sky wide open, and rain fell like it was trying to wash the town clean. Marceline unlocked the side door of Zion's Grace for the first time. She stepped inside, lit one candle, and sat alone in the stillness. Just her and the golden chair above. She whispered prayers, not just for herself anymore, but for the ones still on the edge. The ones who hadn't walked through the door yet. The ones whose names were only known by God in the streets. She didn't see the chair move. Not that night. But she didn't need to. Because now she understood, the miracle wasn't just in the moment it moved. It was in everything that happened after. It was in redemption found in silence. In kindness given without condition. In second chances that came dr. And though the past still lingered, like a shadow trailing behind her, Marceline walked forward each day with her face turned to the light. She became a sister to the wounded, a guide to the lost, and a quiet storm in a world too often loud with judgment. And sometimes, just sometimes, when someone cried out from the deepest part of themselves and the weight lifted from their shoulders, folks would swear they saw it. That golden chair, hanging a little higher. Shining a little brighter. Like heaven was nodding its head. On a dusty Thursday afternoon, long after the sun had slid behind the clouds and the streets grew quiet like they were listening for something, a boy named Tyrell stood outside Zion's Grace. He couldn't have been more than 16, tall for his age but thin like he'd been missed by too many meals. His hoodie was too big, shoes scuffed down to their bones, eyes carrying the kind of tired that didn't come from staying up late, it came from carrying too much alone. He'd been standing there for an hour, maybe more, just staring up at the church like it might bite him if he got too close. Inside, Marceline was sweeping the back hall, humming an old Mahalia tune that made the walls feel warmer. She glanced through the stained glass, spotted the boy, and something in her chest stirred, an old ache she knew too well. She put the broom aside, wiped her hands, and stepped out into the soft evening air. "You lost, baby?" she asked gently, voice smooth like molasses but sharp enough to catch his attention. Tyrell didn't answer. He looked past her, toward the door. That the church with the floating chair? Marceline smiled just a little, a dimple flashing. That's the one. But it don't float all the time. Only when it's moved by something real. He looked down at his feet, then back at her. You think it'd move for someone like me? She stepped closer, real slow. I think it moved for someone like me. So yeah, I think it just might. Tyrell followed her inside, eyes wide, taking in the glow of the sanctuary, the quiet hum of something he couldn't name but could feel. Marceline led him to the front, didn't force a prayer, didn't ask no questions. Just sat with him in the silence. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. But he sat. And sometimes, sitting is the first kind of faith. They came every Thursday after that. Marceline and Tyrell. She'd bring an extra sandwich, he'd bring the weight of his week. Some days they'd talk. Other days they'd sit in the quiet and let the stillness heal what words couldn't touch. One Thursday, he brought a poem. Written on notebook paper with the edges torn. It wasn't neat, and it didn't rhyme perfect, but it was raw and real and beautiful. He handed it to her, nervous, like it was glass. It's about my mama, he mumbled. She used to sing to me. Before she left. Marceline read it slow. She didn't say a word when she finished. Just reached out, put her hand on his, and let the silence speak for her. That night, as they sat in the front pew and the streetlights flickered outside, the golden chair above them began to shimmer. It didn't swing wild. It didn't blaze like fire. But it glowed, a soft, steady light like a candle in a window, like hope that stayed lit even when the wind blew cruel. Tyrell didn't look up at first. But Marceline did. And then she whispered, "Baby, it's moving." His eyes shot up, wide, unbelieving. He stared, mouth parted, breath caught somewhere between fear and wonder. And just like that, something cracked open in him. Not all the way. Just a little. Enough. He didn't cry. Not right then. But he smiled. Just barely. And Marceline knew. Another story had started. Zion's grace had room for them all. The fallen. The searching. The tired. Each one carried in by pain. Each one lit up by grace. Each one watched over by that hanging golden chair. Suspended above it all, glowing only when truth touched it. And heaven whispered, yes. Weeks turned to months, and Zion's grace became more than a church. It became a sanctuary for the broken, a lighthouse for the wandering, and a second home for folks who thought they didn't have a first. The pews were still creaky, and the roof still leaked when the rain got real bad, but none of that mattered. The real beauty was in the souls that showed up, and the stories they brought with them. Tyrell kept coming, his poetry growing bolder, clearer. He even read one aloud during a youth night, voice trembling but firm. The congregation clapped like he'd split the Red Sea. Afterward, Pastor Reuben put a hand on his shoulder and said, God gave you that gift to turn your pain into light. Don't ever forget that. And Marceline, well, she bloomed. Not overnight, not in one glorious moment, but slow and steady like wildflowers coming up through sidewalk cracks. She started leading a prayer circle for women who used to walk her path. Not to preach at them, but to sit with them. Listen. Cry. Laugh. Heal. The women called her Mama Celine, and her name, once whispered in gossip, was now spoken with reverence. That golden chair. It hung higher than it ever had. Not because it floated toward heaven, but because the people beneath it rose up. Not perfect. Not polished. But real. And every time someone came in heavy and left a little lighter, the chair glowed, soft like moonlight, quiet like answered prayers. One Sunday morning, after the last Amen, and just before the organ player packed up, Marceline stood. She turned to the people, her people, and spoke, voice steady as a river. You know, that chair don't solve your problems. It ain't magic. It don't erase what's behind you. But it shows you that something holy still sees you. Still believes in you. And sometimes, that's enough to keep walking. She looked toward Tyrell, then toward the door, where a new face had just stepped in, another soul pulled by rumor or faith or desperation. We all come here with stories we think disqualify us. But grace don't care where you've been. Only where you're going. Don't wait for perfect. Just show up. That's when the chair moves. The congregation nodded, some with tears, some with smiles. And in that moment, the chair shimmered again, like it agreed. Thank you for walking through this story with me. If it touched you, even just a little, go ahead and like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories that lift the soul and stir the spirit. Because somewhere out there, another chair is waiting to move. And someone's healing might just begin with your share. Until next time, stay grounded, stay open, and stay walking toward the light.